if everybody's got access to these tools and they get more and more powerful, nothing's compelling anymore. It's all mediocrity because that's the new baseline. Then how do you stand out? You go back to the principles of positioning, brand differentiation, voice, and you can use Gen AI to help prompt you into those and build those, but you do need differentiation more than ever. And that's a tried and true marketing principle that's never going to go away, especially now. It's more and more important.
Welcome back to another installment of the Perspective Podcast. My name is Devin, and today I have with me Neel Singh, who is a business leader with 20 plus years of experience in marketing, technology, and business transformation. He's guided companies from startup to public enterprises, partnering with CEOs to drive innovation, competitive positioning, and brand transformation. As a co-founder of Tropoli, he helps businesses with their go-to-market and scaling efforts as a strategist, marketing advisor, and a fractional leader. And I'm excited to have him on the show today. We're going to be covering a couple of really important topics that are in the ethosphere right now, related to the CMO gap, the generalist skill set, and what all the hype is around AI. I'm very excited to welcome Neel to the program. Neel, thanks for joining me today.
Devin, good to see you again, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, a little bit of background here. Me and Neel had conducted an interview on a different show that I was a host of, and he reached out to have a continued conversation. So I'm a little bit familiar with who you are and what you're up to, but this audience might not be. So could we grab maybe just a quick 5 minute Cole's notes of your background so we have some context for the conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, I've got a lot of experience in marketing and technology. When I say marketing, we could talk about me being a CMO and an ex-executive. I've also been an entrepreneur, and all things that come with marketing, especially around brand strategy, growth marketing, and around content, events, and all of that. And so, in my experience, I have led and built teams and departments. I've scaled companies, through marketing and growth. I've worked with all sorts of different sectors, including technology. Everyone says AI now, I think, because we're all part of AI now. But I've been involved with the AI industry for more than a decade, and other industries such as cybersecurity, energy, capital markets. And so today with Troply, we are working with leaders, leadership teams, CEOs, and helping them scale. And at times we'll jump in as fractionals as well.
Excellent. Okay, so in your history, you have acquired a very unique set of skills. And not to sound like a movie trailer, but this kind of gives way to a very similar experience that I've had, where you kind of go out into the world with what you think you start working with people and helping people, and then all of a sudden you're thrust into these situations where you're out of your scope of knowledge, you have no idea what you're doing, but somehow you manage to figure it out, and over time you kind of accumulate all of these, I call them transferable skills, you might call them something else, but I think it has contributed to reshaping the way that businesses and business owners are thinking about how they hire, what kind of people they want on their team. And it used to be, and this is, I'm a very, I have a very strange relationship with this saying, but it used to be that a jack of all trades is a master of none. I didn't know that there's more to it, which is, but oftentimes better than a master of one. And so it points at having a generalized skill set being something that is more valuable in the ecosystem of a business startup. What's your experience and relationship with that? Have you noticed this happening in the work that you're doing? How has it shown up for you?
Yeah, this is near and dear to my heart. So the saying "Jack of all trades, master of none" used to really piss me off. So I adjusted it to master of many, because I just think um, being honed in and specialized on like a very singular skill is actually detrimental, especially given the complexity and the rapid rate of change in our current, climate, business climate industries. So I got a little story. this was back in, I think, 2018. I was working for a firm. I was heading up marketing there. I was on the leadership team. We had as part of the people and culture initiative, we had started doing what was called First Fridays. And so first Friday of every month, we would have an expert come in and speak about something inspiring or useful. And it'd be a mix of external experts and internal, folks. And it doesn't matter what department you're from, what skill level, whatever contribution you're making to the company, you could be involved in this initiative. And we had a theater room, and we had beers, and it was a really cool initiative. And so towards the end of I think it was 2017, a close colleague and friend of mine was also running PR and comms in the company, and he had slacked the leadership group, said, it'd be nice if somebody from the leadership would come and present at one of our first Fridays. And I put my hand up. I'm like, I'll do the first one in 2018, no problem. I'd love to do this. And so, it wasn't the first Friday of January. We had gone to, like, I think the third, given the holidays and all of that. And my colleague would reach out to me. He's like, your topic, what you're going to talk about. I'm like, yeah, of course. I could talk about branding. I could talk about product strategy. As the date got closer, I was like, wait, I don't want to talk about work stuff to work people. Like, this is so, like, corporate, like it should be something inspiring. So what am I interested in? And I'm like, I'm interested in so many things. Like I just, like, there's stuff I could talk about in what I'm interested in, the science side of things, or economics, or, like, technology, and, like, and my brain starts spinning. So I Google searched people that have too many interests, and what came up was this term, multipotentiality. I was like,
Mm,
oh wow, this is a thing. And it's the ability of a person to have intellectual curiosity in multiple realms, and actually being able to learn and being good at those. And then you look back in history, you look at the Renaissance man, you look at the Leonardo da Vinci's, the polymaths, and it's a thing, and you look at today, certain CEOs, certain entrepreneurs, they need to have this, broad skill set. So I presented on that. That was my topic, and it took me down a rabbit hole of the psychology behind this. I'm like, this is so me, and I thought it was rare, but after giving that presentation, and I've done it a few times since, many people come up to me like, I didn't know this was a thing. This is, you just kind of illuminated this for me. Like, I have so many interests. I don't know how to, like, hone in on them and things like that. And so for me, one thing that gave me a lot of solace was Steve Jobs' speech at Stanford, his commencement speech, when he talked about looking back and connecting the dots, and that to me
mm,
was, it sung to me. It was very powerful. And so now, fast forward to today, people call me a marketing, leader or whatever, but my experience has spanned in so many different areas, and I'm able to draw upon those and really leverage, adjacent departments or different industries or some of the creative pursuits I've taken, and really put them into, like, say, strategic thinking, or just, like, being able to work with different departments in different areas. And I think this it's challenging. It can be, because people want to put you in a box or a bucket, and they want to define you as one thing. So with me, that causes some problems when I'm meeting somebody at a cocktail party, or what do you do, or what are you into? And it's like my head explodes. So it's like I like asking the questions and kind of gearing towards some of my interests towards the person instead. So positioning has always been an issue for people like me. But given today, um, we're going to talk about Gen AI. I think people that have been hyper specialized in the knowledge economy might be in trouble, because um, it's now, it's like, um, if you were a designer or a copywriter and all you did was focus on one skill, you're gonna have a hard time competing against somebody that can write and design well. Someone that can write and crunch out numbers on a spreadsheet and do research. Someone that understands product strategy and design. So the people that are layering in these intersections and using things like generative AI to help bolster that are going to be, that's where I see the workforce is going. You still need to have a strong skill set, strong knowledge base, strong experience, but now you have tools that allow you to connect the dots a little bit better, right? And so I fear that if you have specialized a little too much in certain industries, it could be challenging for you.
Yeah, I relate to that. You said what when people ask you, what do you do? I have a very tongue-in-cheek response to that, which is whatever I want. And it gets a nice laugh, and it creates some curiosity and allows me to expand upon something based on, to your point, what somebody else's interest is, because I have such a vast array as well. I'm reminded as you were speaking of uh, when I was a kid, kind of in high school. They ask you that question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I don't know about you, Bam, but I was terrified of the prospect of having to pick one thing and then do that one thing for the rest of my life. And this came back to me, and I might have shared this with you before, but this came back to me recently, probably 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. My girlfriend has a son, and he's coming of that age now where he's going to have to go out into the world and do something with his life. And when we asked him the question, that's a very similar question, like, what do you want to do when you kind of finish school? And he said, well, I don't know what all the jobs are. And I thought that was such a profound answer, because that's very, very simple. I'm 38, I'm in the workforce, I have areas of expert skill, and I still don't know what all the jobs are. I did not know that somebody would hire me to type messages back and forth with an AI chatbot to build an app for them. I didn't know that was an option when I was in high school. The world is expanding and changing and evolving, and there's all these really intelligent people who are working on very insane things and bringing them to life, and it's making what you and I and other people do a lot easier. And to your point now, if you're going to hire somebody, the people who have a deep enough understanding of each of these things individually as they are, and also how they all connect together, they're going to do so much better than somebody who is just specifically good at one particular thing. For example, coding. If you are good at coding, I don't know about you, but I've heard that coding language is so complex that it takes a decade of your life to really fully truly grasp and understand it, and then you multiply that by all of the different coding ecosystems there are, and all of a sudden you do not have enough lifetimes to be able to master those things to any depth. However, with the advent of the tools that we have now, our capability has expanded. So how do you see that kind of playing out in your world and in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of draw upon that point, um, of somebody that's been like hyper specialized, using coding as an example. I mean, whatever kind of language for whatever application we're talking about, but it's not so much that, we've pursued a path and it's wrong. It's that we've been taught, like through the education system, through society, to hyper specialized, because division of labor works for the economy. It used to anyway. And so it's been ingrained, especially in our generations. It's still there, and it's kind of sad to see that it hasn't evolved from that. But when we're going through school and the education system, it teaches us what to learn, but not how to learn. And again, I'm using a blanket statement. There's been a lot of improvement there, but we often forget that what we're good at something. There was a time we didn't know anything about that topic, right? It doesn't matter if you're younger, if you're older, actually, I'd argue you can learn even better because you've learned how to learn,
Mm-hmm.
and so just remembering, when people say like, oh, I don't have training in that, or how am I going to make the adjustment? It's like, well, you never had training in the thing that you do now, and one day you went on that path to learn that. So I think being able to learn quickly, um, being able to go through that discomfort of being a beginner again and again and again, um, I think that's super necessary now, right? And again, there's doing that over and over. You mentioned it earlier, transferable skills. Well, I think learning how to learn is the most important one. You know, your curiosity might lead you into different areas, but then taking the time and investing and learning something new and then supplementing that with something that you've already learned. For example, now you have tools that'll get you into different coding languages. Well, you've already learned how to learn one. You know, you may not need to learn the other one in depth as much, okay? But you may just need to learn the applications of it or maybe some of the structure around it and work with other coders that have the 20 years experience in that particular language. Now you know how to work with them, right? So I think having the courage to go make yourself uncomfortable and learn something new, whether it's theoretical or technical or maybe a mix of both, is going to get you a lot further. So I think this needs to be prevalent in companies. I think it needs to be prevalent in the education system. I think it needs to be sewn into our societal thinking, kind of like how hyper specialization was. I'm not saying we should replace specialization because in certain areas it's absolutely needed, but this should be accompanying it because maybe this is, depending on your industry, this is what you need to learn and this is the way you need to be.
The goal is not for us to stay the same. It is for us to evolve. And this is, I think, one of the fundamental problems with going deep on one very specific thing. Because that one very specific thing in that span of time that it takes you to really have that full, deep, comprehensive knowledge and understanding of it, the world has moved on past that by then. And and you mentioned the most valuable skill is learning how to learn. And I, as you said that, remembered one of the things that I did when kind of finished high school and went out into the world on my own was like I don't know even how to like understand the way that I absorb or take in knowledge and information. And so I remember going on YouTube back in its infancy and watching videos of people teaching you how to like teach yourself things. And I think that that's been one of the highest ROI skills that I've ever acquired in all of the things that I've done. And, now I see teachers on TikTok whining and complaining about students having a lack of an attention span and not being able to teach them and not being able to learn. And I would pose this one observation to them. Have you ever sat down and watched your kid? Do you have kids, Neil?
I don't know.
Okay. So I have a 10-year-old and um, arguably an iPad kid. We did not put restrictions as he was growing up on his use of technology. We guided his use of technology to be a part of how he interfaces with the world. And it was contrary to everybody. But does not exhibit the same behaviors as the typical iPad child who is addicted to the technology and can't really break away from it or do anything meaningful with their time. And that's that right there. That's the observation. I gave my kid a PC. He went on to this game, and inside of that game is like the functionality of trying to build stuff, very much like Minecraft. Minecraft's a really great example of this. He wants to build a 3D model of a working engine and figured out how to do this with redstone contraptions and toggles and switches and all kinds of stuff inside of a video game. He was glued to that screen for 8 hours straight, did not break his attention once to complete that task. And so I make the argument that we're in a place now, as humans, that we're learning on 2x speed almost. And the education system and the way that things are taught have not kept up with the way that we do this. Mind you, Audible has this really great feature where you can put it on 2x speed and listen to somebody speak faster. And I don't know about you, but I'm a 2.25 times speed listener because I just got so good at listening at 1.5 and then at 2, and now it's a little bit faster. And now I feel like I can absorb the information a lot quicker. But that's the point, is that the landscape is evolving so quickly that it makes it almost impossible to be deeply skilled at something because when you figure that out, something else has come up. And so for
Yes.
you in the work that you do, how do you combat that? Like, how do you balance between like, let's get as much knowledge as we can while also evolving at the same speed as the industry is?
Yeah, well, I'm in a position where I'm solving problems for businesses, so it forces me to learn about what's ailing them, but what
Right.
industry they're in, and what are some of the everything from a macro viewpoint,
Hmm.
and looking at some of the market forces and learning about those. You can use a pestle or whatever to really understand. And then diving into the workings of a business, and then looking at where their challenges are and solving them. Just that journey alone teaches me a lot, because I have to research and make sense of the data I'm collecting and the narrative, and seeing how some of these things are bumping up against the client, and what can we do to resolve that. So that allows me to keep in touch. Um, Again, being able to learn how to learn and utilize that, it's helped me a lot to be able to navigate. It's given me the confidence that if I'm up against something I haven't seen before, I can say, like, this is the approach I'll take. And some of that's intake and learning, and some of that's using some of the frameworks and methodologies I've used in the past, or adapting them. I'm comfortable being in that situation, and I think some people aren't, right? And I think many others are, right? So if you're uncomfortable in that, I would suggest, making, like, whatever it is for you that makes learning fun. Like, whether it's, I'm a whiteboard guy, also a Google Sheets guy, I'm a deep research, using Perplexity or ChatGPT guy. I also have a bunch of notepads I sketch. Sometimes I just take a break from everything, go for a walk, I let my brain man. I got so many techniques. Sometimes I even send myself voice notes. I just listen to my where I'm at that day, and what's going to help me kind of absorb this information and synthesize it. To me, that's fun. It sounds very nerdy, but it is fun for me, right? And so, if you have a bit of a fear to kind of venture off into a new area, perhaps find a way, if schooling worked for you, and that structured um, um, uh, teaching method and a structured style worked for you. There's so many resources online, from, like you mentioned, YouTube videos to the Udemy's, to the master classes. There's ways to learn that way. If you're a little bit more scrappy, you could just learn by doing. The barriers to create something are very low now, right? And they have been for a while. And so, yeah, that's what I suggest. And I think, for me, it's always been a combination of, problem solving and finding a way to solve it, and digging in through the information required and the learning required, and also curiosity. I just, if there's a new industry I haven't worked in, I become very curious about it. I want to learn how it works. I want to learn the macro headwinds. I want to learn the type of people that are influencing. I want to learn the policy around it. And just, again, it's me being a nerd, but that's why I feel like I can do my best work if I nerd out on something. So again, that's just me. I think everybody needs to find their learning style.
That's so relatable, man. My founding partner of Seven Tree, who's no longer a partner at Seven Tree, he moved on to do other things. But one of our first gigs that we were pitching was for, I think it was called Skunk Works Distilleries here in Calgary. And I drink every once in a while, but I don't really know much about it. And in order to fully get an understanding of like who this client was and like what we were stepping into, I fell down this rabbit hole of learning how to distill moonshine because that was one of their kind of flagship products was a variety of different infused moonshines. And so I was like, well, I need to be able to talk to them about their product and stuff. So, man, I spent like a couple of weeks just like drawing these things out, how this contraption works and like why you do this and do that and like where does the infusion come from and then when I went to talk to them, it was super embarrassing because like some of the notes are still there and I'm like, hey, so when it comes to like this kind of stuff, like how are you communicating that with your clients? But it was still like having that depth of knowledge. I can relate deeply to that like really wanting to fully understand something and diving into it just for the sake of like, hey, this is something new to experience and I would love to learn more about it. So completely relatable.
Well, I just want to add to that note. I think sometimes you can be like, I have this client that's an expert in this industry, and I
Hmm.
don't know much about it. I don't want to appear stupid in front of them, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
some of that stuff. I think if you know how to ask the right questions, they're more than willing to help and help you kind of get up to speed, right? And those questions come from the research, it's like, oh, okay, I need to know a little bit more about this distilling process, or, I see, this certain type of moonshine is done this way, and these guys are selling a different kind, is this applicable? So once you kind of look under the surface a little bit and you come with those thoughtful questions, typically the client or the person you're dealing with is somewhat impressed. They're like, oh, you're able to actually kind of ask me questions, not like what is moonshine and how do you make it, but more like, oh, okay, this is a process I've seen, is yours similar or different? Is there a differentiation there or whatever, so I think that helps, if there's a little bit of a imposter syndrome or like a confidence issue that you're working with somebody that's deep in their expertise, and you're kind of scratching the surface. I think it's good to be transparent and open about that. And it's like, I need to learn this industry. I need to learn from you. I need to workshop this a little bit, so that I can do what I do really well, right? So, by the way, do you remember anything from that project? I mean, I'm sure you're sampling the product quite a bit.
Yeah, well, the one thing I learned is I can't drink moonshine. So
Fair.
and it did was a good like was there was a happy ending to the story. She did end up becoming a client under a coaching capacity, and we did help a little bit with her brand communication and helping her kind of establish an online presence. And so it did at the end of the day serve me to be able to communicate with them on the same level, and not again from a place of like disparity or lack. Like I didn't know enough. I knew enough now that I could ask, we could talk about certain elements of it, and we could pinpoint why those things were important to the marketing message. And so it's those parts too that really matter to the
Mhm.
client or to somebody that you're working with is once you kind of know more about their business, now you can help them articulate the things that they can't quite grasp or frame because they're a little bit too close to the painting, right? They're working on the tiny
Mhm.
little dots and details, and I still have the capacity to zoom out and be able to see the bigger picture, right? And I think that that's important to note, especially from a generalist perspective, is having the ability to still be able to step back and zoom out and look at things. Um, for you, especially being on the front lines, it kind of affords you a very unique vantage point. And so I'm curious, Neil, when you're working with businesses, where do you see the major gaps between the work that you do and the work that they're doing, and how do you kind of bridge that together to achieve positive outcomes for people?
Yeah, it's typically, they're in a certain inflection point in their business,
Hmm.
and there may or may not have been there before. So um it's typically, you know uh when they're either, maybe they just got funded or they're about to get funded, they're entering a new market, just trying to launch a new product. Their branding doesn't make sense anymore. So typically they say something like, "Oh, we need some mature leadership, or we need a CMO to help us get to that next level, or we need some counsel on how to get through this hyper growth phase." So those to me are signals that call out to me, and it's like, okay, I've been here before, and I can work alongside you. I can jump in fractionally and get your marketing department and function matured, to the point where, you can hit this next milestone, or you can hit this level of growth. So that's typically that's the gap I try to bridge. I've been through that on the inside before, and I didn't know I needed help because you're just so in the weeds, and you're working 80-hour weeks, and you're trying to handle a department that's grown so quickly, and you're in a market that's moving so fast, and all the other departments are depending on you, and so you're not even thinking, you're just like doing, 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 and so I think it requires either that ICP, that client has gone through it before, and they're like, okay, we're gonna need a couple of safe pair of hands to get us through this, or they recognize it through the process. They're like, hey, we don't know how to navigate through this, and we need some help, right? So that's typically, try to bring in some strategic and leadership chops, and also some execution, in maturing their marketing function.
So when you mentioned they need mature or more mature leadership or somebody who has had more experience being in the space, and it's typically on the like a bridge point where you're coming from being the guy that works on the tools, and now you're kind of stepping back and you're going to work on the business instead. But that transition is very difficult for people. And to your point, sometimes it's hard for them to kind of see whether or not, the timing is right for something like that. What would you say are some good indicators for people out there who are kind of in that position and not really aware of or ready to even make a decision like that? Like what should they be looking for to be ready for somebody like you?
Are they working 80-hour weeks?
That's a good start. Yeah.
Right? Are things you're moving really fast, but at the same time, things are slowing down because you're bottlenecking,
Mm,
right? So there's a sense of hurry up and wait for your team because there's a bottleneck there. I think that's an indication of you're too in the weeds and you need to process your way out a little bit. And that could you could use a helping hand, like an external view on getting you there. Um, Also, you might be chugging along, all your processes are working, your sales pipeline is doing what it's supposed to do, your revenue's steady, and you're like, I can't break out of this inertia. Like we've got this repeated revenue, but we have a vision to be 10x this. Like how do we scale this? And so that it could be another indicator. Like so it's not as painful, but it's more like we're hoping to have a certain valuation, or we're hoping to, hit a certain revenue point, and over the last 3 to 6 months, we just continue to flatline. So that would be another indicator.
okay, so now I'm picking up on there's kind of different stages too where you might be necessary. Um, for example, let's say at the beginning stages where you're kind of formulating and structuring go to market, and maybe you're venture backed or you have some capital and you can kind of invest in that sort of thing. And then in the middle, there's like scaling, like, okay, I want to get off the tools, I want to work on the business, I want to grow, I want to build a team, maybe cross over a seven-figure number or something like that. And then the last one I kind of picked up on was the exit strategy. Somebody who's like, okay, I'm pretty much done this marathon here. I got a few more years left in me, but in those few years, I need to get the heck out of here. So, in each of these different stages, what are some of the big differences that you've experienced, and how do you kind of help address those things?
To me, they're almost overlapping. So not necessarily like with an exit strategy, it's not necessarily that they're looking to like retire or move on, but it's like going public or selling to another entity or even acquiring another entity. Like so some of those corporate transactions, like strategic transactions, and there's a thing that we call investor readiness, like how you've been selling to a particular customer or customer segments for years. Now you need to communicate to a very different audience. It's either a public markets or capital markets or your PE group or a group of investors, and that requires you to look at your business in a very different way,
Mm,
right? Your differentiator in the market, uh, you may be used to like selling to a certain customer and differentiating from your competitors in a way that's like brand or product forward or feature forward. Um, but when you zoom out, your differentiator might be in how you're allocating capital to your supply chain and how that's creating better margins versus, typical businesses in your market. And an investor looks at that as well as the customer side of things, right? So how do you tell that story? How do you structure your value proposition, your business model in a way that the streets can understand, in a way that a potential buyers can understand, in a way that retail and institutional investors are going to understand, right? And so that could happen mid stage, that can happen early stage. It's just a very it's an evolution of your narrative to another set of consumers, um, being investors, analysts, media, etc. Right. And so that's kind of where we help as well, is positioning for that, knowing that you're going towards a certain milestone. Now, I think early stage to mid stage, we'll work with both, like you said, but earlier stage, we tend to work with those, yeah, like you mentioned, typically just recently capitalized or well capitalized. We like founders that have experience, whether it's in their industry or whether they've experienced building a business before, or whether they've been an executive that in a kind of like a startup, and that's kind of gone through that. They're better for us to work with because they kind of understand what we do, right? So there's not a big steep educational component to it. I hope I answered your question. I think we kind of went into the weeds here
Yeah.
with this.
Yeah, well, and that's it, right? As you were going here, I kind of tapped into the fact that there's two different sides of the coin here that's kind of playing out. There's like the real world stuff where it's like, okay, you need SOPs, you need some systems and processes, you need things in the business to make it function properly at different stages. But then there's also on the back end of that some mindset things like, limiting beliefs or just the way that you think things should go that are incongruent with the reality of the way things can go. And so, like, what's your strategy for tackling that part of it? Because I know that that's a lot more um, in the ethos. Like, there's nothing tangible there, and it's really now about the way you communicate with somebody and help them see something that they're either unwilling to see, they haven't even looked before, or now that they're looking, they're in complete disbelief. Like, how do you manage that part of it, the human element?
The messy part of it, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It depends on what their outcomes and goals are. I think data being pragmatic
Mm,
is very helpful. If you're running up against a client or even a colleague that's kind of set in their ways and they only believe what they have seen, try to show them something new. Show them it's not new, but something different that makes sense. Whether you can reverse engineer another company that's kind of done what they want to do, or showing them data, whether it's again, we're kind of talking ambiguously here, but like if it's customer data, if it's within their own organization, how people actually believe about something. So this is where you have to see, like I've come to a point where we feel comfortable firing clients if it's not a
mm,
fit. And I've done this almost my whole career, to be honest, because you can only do as good as your environment allows you. And if your client is creating a certain environment for you, you have to make sure it's worth it. If there is no chance in you guys moving forward together and they're not really trusting your expertise or your counsel or your advisory, it's not a good situation to be in. You're not going to win them over. If the money's really, really, really good, then maybe you stick it out for a bit until you can move on from them. But if that's important to you, but other than that, if you're able to gel with them, if you're able to win them over with your pragmatism and your creativity and your expertise, the way you think, and they find value in that, then you'll still butt heads. You'll still have to win them over probably, depending on their personality type. But if there's no chance in hell that they're gonna, think differently, that's probably not a good situation for you to be in.
yeah, change management is a very difficult uh, and nuanced skill set. There's a
Yes.
lot, there's a lot that goes into that part of things. And I imagine, especially with evolving technologies, there are still people out there in business that are using a DOS operating system with the green text and dot matrix screens. So
You
I
just made me
don't.
nostalgic with that.
Yeah, I literally saw this just the other day. A business was still interfacing with like tab, 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 like F4. I'm like, there's a
Wow.
mouse, right? You they have touch screens now, right? But that does kind of open the door, I guess, in our conversation here, Neil, to um, what sorts of technologies are coming down the pipeline? Like, what's on the horizon? What are you excited about? What's out there that you're keeping an eye on? You mentioned at the top of the show that AI and technology, you've been in it for a lot longer than, most people have. You've had to be. A lot of people aren't even still aware of the fact that ChatGPT is a possibility. So, what what out there has your attention? What are you excited about, and what are you focused on learning more about right now?
I definitely want to touch on AI, but I think there's going to be a lot of innovation in energy, just because there is such a demand for processing and compute, as they call it. So
Hmm.
data centers are popping up everywhere. You're seeing a lot of investment from the likes of Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, in these data centers, which provide the computing power for generative AI. Um, and so that requires a lot of energy, and this is why you're seeing, nuclear power kind of coming back into the psyche, which I think is a great thing personally. So there is there's going to be further investment in that, but outside of Gen AI, like are a lot of, I say our, like as if it affects everybody, but it affects a lot of places where our energy grids are outdated and they're structurally rigid.
Hmm.
So you're seeing more brownouts, more blackouts. We've saw that one recently in Texas, I think like a couple of years ago. So these energy grids are already under strain from population growth, from technological advancements, and now Gen AI is like really, really pulling on that. There's still a lot of stuff happening in blockchain, and that's going to continue to grow. And these are all energy intensive things. So there's right now it's like the tap is always on. There's some energy source, whether it's coming through coal or through wind power or whatever renewables, and that energy flows through with and it's always on. And that means that no matter what's happening with the consumption side of things, no matter what's happening with a natural disaster, no matter what's happening with storms, what's happening with population growth, that energy is just flowing through constantly. So I believe battery technology is going to be more and more prevalent and more important because it's going to be able to control that flow and store energy when it's not needed as much and disperse it when it's needed more, which is going to make the grids much more resilient. So I went into this whole other area of energy, but that's all because the demand side is really scaling up with Gen AI and the training of these models. The more and more people use these tools, every single prompt you do requires energy, and that's going to continue to scale these models. And I think it was GPT-3 to train that model was the equivalent. And I'm going to butcher this because I don't have my data in front of me. But I think it was the equivalent of powering 100 US homes for a year, right? And that was GPT-3. So that doesn't include all the prompts that are happening with it, all the other models that are out there now, the training of those models, the usage of those models, and that continues to scale as it becomes, integrated with our society. The energy side needs to innovate and it needs to scale.
I heard Mr. Wonderful there, Kevin O'Leary, is working on building a really big energy plant and data center compound of some sort here in southern Alberta, actually, and creating a whole bunch of jobs and things like that. And so all of these new technologies and these new industries are all leaning heavily into their need for things that were traditionally there and taken for granted, I think. And like, I'm sure just myself, I'm single-handedly responsible for at least a dozen homes power this year alone, and how much I've used AI and generative technologies and building things. And I have just now finally started dabbling in the app building capabilities. Like, it's cool we can make pictures, it's cool we can make videos. They're still a little hinky. Those guys are going to keep working on that. I don't know that that'll replace the way that we still do what we do. There'll still need to be some level of human involvement, I believe, in a lot of that generative stuff. But to simplify, this is what WordPress did to HTML. You put together a bunch of components and all of a sudden anybody can build a website in an evening of tinkering on the computer, and the whole industry transforms. And now, how many web developers exist as a result of them having been able to use and navigate the WordPress interface? So, what happens with technologies like Replit now, where you can, with just a few prompts, get at least a loose wireframe of a functioning application, and it doesn't really cost you much. I have a Replit account right now. It costs me $25. I'm building two apps simultaneously right now, and I think I've probably spent maybe $50 in the last 3 weeks just fiddling around with it. But that is significantly less money than it would be to hire somebody who does coding. So there's a trade-off, I think, that we're kind of experiencing here. What are your thoughts on the, I don't know, the ethics or morality of this whole thing too, right? things are changing and faster than I think most people want to accept.
Yeah, I think things are changing rapidly, but there is way too much hype right now, I believe. And I can't help myself. I find myself responding to people's sensational LinkedIn posts now because they're popping up everywhere. And I just put something out yesterday. Everyone's like, "We are so cooked. We are so cooked." ChatGPT or OpenAI can now, uh, emulate an episode of Severance in the form of Simpsons. And it's like, using a Simpsons style. And I'm like, it looks pretty cool, but what is a practical use of this, right? So how does this get consumed outside of these posts saying that, you know, production is dead and designers are dead, and writers are dead, um, what what is the practical use of this? So like here's a thought experiment. What if humans in society stopped creating? What if we stopped using our ingenuity, stopped creating? What would happen to Gen AI, right? Like what right now there's several studies out saying it's pretty much tapped all the data that's online, right? And it's almost done, like consuming all of that, right? So what's next? Now, if we stop creating things, what happens to the Gen AI tools?
Hmm.
Right? There's nothing to feed it anymore. So where is it going to get its information? Right? So we are the data source, right? When it comes to that. Now, the other side of this is, let's say we do continue to keep creating stuff. It's it's sensationalized to me right now because people are like, "Oh my God, look how cool this trailer is," But the trailer actually sucks.
Yeah.
There's no story behind it. There's no continuity of narrative. It doesn't go back to that protagonist they showed at the beginning of the video. That model is gone for the rest of the trailer. It's not a trailer. It's just a bunch of pretty cool looking slow motion videos in space or on Earth that are stitched together with voiceover that was probably created by an AI. To me, cool. It looks cool. Try putting that in a theater. Everyone's gonna be
Hmm.
like, "What the hell is this?" No one's gonna watch that movie, right? And so that's where I'm saying the hype is. I love Gen AI. It's a greatest compressor of time. It's a greatest companion. But if I was to start a prompt with my GPT-4, which I have on screen right here, and I walked away and you sat down and continued, it would have no idea that there's another person there, right? So it
Hmm.
isn't close to human intelligence. It's not close to human ingenuity at all, right? It's taking existing IP, existing human ingenuity, and then making it accessible. Now, if everybody's got access to these tools and they get more and more powerful, um, nothing's compelling anymore. It's all mediocrity because that's the new baseline. We saw this with stock photos. This is stock photos on steroids. Um, then how do you stand out? You go back to the principles of positioning, brand differentiation, voice, all those things, and you can use Gen AI to help prompt you into those and build those, but you do need differentiation more than ever. And that's a tried and true marketing principle, that does never going to go away, especially now. It's more and more important. So, yeah, I can't help myself. I've been commenting on a lot of these posts and just literally calling them out on it because I find it's almost does a disservice, especially to younger professionals trying to like get into marketing and get into creative industries and to know that, if you can't tell a story, it doesn't matter. If you don't
Hmm.
understand how lighting works, it doesn't matter. If you don't understand how character development happens and character arcs and good writing and good scripting, if you don't know those things, then you can use these tools all you want, but it's just not going to go anywhere, right? You can use these tools to help you learn, but you do need to know those foundations. So yeah, that's part of it. Another thought experiment is what happens if you turn your internet off? for like a month? What if you turned everything off for a month? What's going to happen to your life? Outside of work, outside of your consumption, I think you're probably gonna probably be a little more active physically. But like you start thinking about things like that conversation you have at the corner store, you go visit your, your elderly aunt or uncle, and they're gonna tell you stories about their past and the village they grew up in and the country they came from. And they're going to tell you these stories and this information that does not exist on the internet. It just doesn't. And so the human interaction, there's a like it's the interaction and the information that gets exchanged on a daily basis doesn't make it to the internet, right? Um, AI doesn't know how to query physics like we do, and we're doing it subconsciously. So there is a swath of data out there that AI just cannot get to, at least not today. Um, so there's that perspective to it as well. It's in a box, in a very big box that has transformed our lives because it's digital. But if you just unplug it for a couple of days, outside, maybe you won't make any money because your work is all based online, but that might be affected. Your bank accounts might be affected. But from a physical standpoint, what really changes, right? I think you should be considering that a little bit. So that's why I get frustrated because again, I worked in AI for a long time, not as an AI engineer or anything. I've been exposed to AI teams and engineers. I've been part of training processes like for machine learning, especially on images and in a digital video space. From a marketing and product marketing standpoint, I've taken some of these, tools to market in the past. And, as I've progressed in my career. I've read more about it. The Singularity is Near is like, a book I read a long time ago. There's waitbutwhy.com does a huge deep dive on Gen AI. Sorry, not Gen AI, AGI and super intelligence. And so today when I see people like we're so cooked, it's over. Those people don't understand how jobs work. They don't understand how consumption works. They don't understand how creativity works, in my opinion. Um, and then you have the big players like Sam Altman saying, "Oh, we're going to achieve artificial general intelligence in the next couple of years," which to me is complete bullshit. They've changed the goalposts. They've changed the definition of it. General intelligence means it can think, feel, and do as a human does, and we're not even remotely close to that. So again, I'm going to preface this. I love AI. I love what it does to transform companies. I love our accessibility to the tool now. If you're creative, it'll make you more creative. If you're strategic, it'll help you with your strategic thinking. It helps you brainstorm. It helps you structure your thinking, your outcomes. You can, yeah, of course, generate images, videos, generate code for the outcome that you're looking for. But there is a lot of hype right now, and that's the part that frustrates me.
The doomsday people saying that this is the end, kind of misleading the general population into thinking that this is the end when the reality is to your point, a car is just a metal box on four wheels until you get behind the wheel and press the gas pedal and steer it around. It doesn't do anything until that happens. And the same thing maybe with a gun. It's just a chunk of metal until you put a bullet in it and pull the trigger. It's not going to do anything until you do that. And so it's the human behind the machine that makes the machine valuable. And I think that is that like that might be the point that you're trying to make, is that
Yeah,
the
I
human
mean,
experience is necessary as a part of this?
well, it's a driver of all of this, right?
Mm.
Well, you can think of it this way. You don't fire a chef just to microwave, his recipes, right?
Yeah.
It's just, I mean,
Damn, that's a good one.
that's kind of like what's happening right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
I always ask this question as well. Okay, so if you're gonna fire your design team or your creative team or your writers or your coders, who's gonna do the work? Because you could utilize um these LLMs and image generators to create some output, but who's going to do that part? So maybe you've reduced your team to like two people to do that, but then who's going to do the analytical aspect if you're doing the creative aspect? So maybe you're a small company and you've had three people in your marketing, and now you've removed them all because of the capabilities of Gen AI. And now that's the responsibility of a salesperson. You've just increased their workload, right? And so just thinking about the expertise, why not, this concept of augmentation has been, discussed a lot recently. But like if you have a team of three, instead of trying to replace them with Gen AI, why don't you augment them with Gen AI and make them a team of six, and have their output increase and, leverage their experience and capabilities.
So as not to become one of the doomsday people, what advice do you have for people out there who are trying to do something useful, who are actually trying to build something here? And yes, sure, it does increase our productivity. I can do twice as many things, which means I can help twice as many people, but I am still the driver. I'm still in the driver's seat. So, like, what advice do you have for other people who are out there who are seeing all of this stuff, um, and don't necessarily know what to do with the information?
Learn the tools. They're amazing tools. They're powerful. So learn them, but also learn the foundation of what you want to get into. If it is marketing, if it is product development, if it is leadership, if it is strategy, like learn the principles around those things, learn the foundations, learn how they work, learn how they add value to a business, learn how they add value to a customer, learn how they affect the economy. And you can use, deep research to learn that stuff, right? It's that's why I love these tools. The knowledge learning has gotten even better and it's more structured and it's conversational. So learn those things and then develop your skills in those and then learn how these Gen AI tools, processes, designed through agents and the likes of Make.com and Zapier. And, there's so many now, Bolt and, Mind Studio. These are very, very cool tools, but you have to be the architect. In order for you to be the architect, you got to know how all the pieces work together. So educate yourself or get trained in the foundations of a particular area and then learn how these tools augment that, learn how they fit in, right? But if you say, oh, I want to get into branding, and then you start using Claude and to come up with naming options, you're not gonna get anywhere with it. It's gonna pick the general answers that are, in the zeitgeist of the internet, and you're not gonna understand the value and the asset of a name, for example, and the trademarking process that goes around it. What makes a good name versus a shitty name? Um, you know, why do you name a product different than a service? Why do you name a corporation in a certain way? Like this type of stuff requires a lot of learning and research and experience. And then you can use, Claude, you can use ChatGPT to give you some concepts and ideas you can play around with and that you can shape using your expertise, right? So, and it's funny, true story. I had a client 2 years ago. Um, like I did a brand audit on them, and I did a bit of a repositioning, and I suggested, you know, uh, a new name, because of their expansion into the US and like new target audience. And on the call, one of the executives used ChatGPT. He's like, "Oh, I could just use this," and came up with 10 names. I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome. Let's read them out together." And they're just like, this is terrible. I'm like, well, yeah, like, it's not going to give you the answer that you're looking for if you don't have the expertise behind it. So, anyways, that was a long rant, but I think know the foundations and principles of the topic you want to get into, and then figure out how the Gen AI tools can augment that.
I'm reminded of a client that I actually had as you were speaking there about asking about SEO stuff and writing articles. He's like, can't you just throw it in ChatGPT and then get something like, why am I paying so much money for this service? Um, and to his point, yes, you could just throw a topic into ChatGPT and then hope and pray that it actually gives you something that would be even remotely useful to an audience of people who you are trying to serve. But there is a great deal of time and effort that goes into refining and researching and crafting the right thing. And that starts so much. earlier than just throw an idea in ChatGPT and then it's going to spit something out. Like you could throw an idea in there and it not even be something that people are searching for. Like, how do you know that? How do you
Yeah.
know that that's something that somebody's searching for just because you're guessing? I don't know about you, but the last time I tried to do any guessing in my business, it failed. So let's not leave that much up to chance and be a little bit more cognizant of how we work. I don't know if you follow Neil Patel. He's the SEO guru. Love this guy. He's very brilliant. One of the metrics that he shared recently in on one of his platforms was the length of time that it takes to write a properly researched SEO article and how that has changed in the advent of having Gen AI assist in those efforts. And before Gen AI, it was about 4.5 hours of time and effort that goes into doing the keyword research, the article writing, refining, all that kind of stuff. When Gen AI came into play, that time cut in half. And then over the following 2 or 3 years, that time cut in half very quickly returned back to a baseline of about 4 hours rather than 4.5 hours, which just goes
Mm,
to show that yes, this is a great tool and it can help, but it can also create a lot of work. And if you're not thinking about this from that perspective of like, hey, I genuinely want to serve my audience, and so I should be writing about things that they need and are searching for, rather than how can I just fill the zeitgeist with a bunch of content. And I'm sure you've heard the doomsday people talking about the death of AI happening very quickly because what happens when you keep feeding it the same information and then its own information back to it, and then just all of a sudden it becomes a complete mess.
yeah. Yeah.
That's the place that we're at right now, is that like all of the places where we go to find something. If I need a plumber and I go to, Google and I search for a plumber, Gen AI and blog article SEO is not going to help you there. That's not going to
Right.
solve the problem. And I get that that's a little bit more closer to the ground mom and pop type stuff. But even on the highest level, if you're searching for something like fractional CMO, I'm having a problem with my marketing. What am I going to search for? And here's 100,000 different terms. Which ones are most likely going to be areas where I can provide value that isn't recycling stuff that's already out there, that is also going to catch attention and then drive traffic and then turn that traffic into a customer? There's just so much more. I mean, has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. You still need those core skill sets. How do you do the keyword research, right? And how is it relevant to your business? What are some of the branded search terms, search phrases? How is it contextual? What are some of the authorities out there that you should be, linking with, aligning with? How does this stack with your ad strategy and your social strategy? Right? How does this stack with your MQL or SQLs? And like, how does this your organic pipeline then plug in, not just your blogging, but maybe you have some ABM marketing, or just direct email marketing. So how do these all play together? And when somebody does search something and they click through and they land on your site, okay, so how is the site optimized to tie in with your ad campaign, your social campaign, your organic search campaign, and then where are you leading them to, and how are you taking them through that customer journey? These are all tied together, and then that ties into the design of the site and the functionality and the UX. So I'm not saying you should know all of that stuff, but you should know enough where it affects all of those things, right? And when they're leaving the site, and how are you recapturing them? How are you remarketing them? You know, again, I know I'm getting into other realms, but it- if SEO is your foundation, it has to play into all of that, and you have to know how
Yeah.
to you have to know how to research, and you have to know a contextual like keywords and contextual messaging, and you have to know about ranking. And now there's an argument, this is all changing because people are just going to search on Gen AI and all of that stuff. That's fine. I don't know where this is headed. Like I think it's going to turn into pay to play. I believe it is. I think
Even
there's
more
an
so than it already is, right? Because that's
yeah,
services have been commoditized thanks to Google. We're at a
yes.
place now where it's like, who's got the deep enough pockets, who can pay for the highest customer acquisition cost, and still be profitable on the other side. And typically, it's not the regular mom and pops. It's not the small, medium-sized businesses. It's the big enterprises that are like, yeah, you know what? We'll capitalize on LTV later. We don't
Yes.
really care. We just need to get people into our system. Like there's a lot of
Right.
these negative balance operating businesses out there that are they just have enough people money behind them that it doesn't matter. So that's what you're up against in this arena.
If I'm using ChatGPT to search for a mom and pop plumber, um, and it recommends three of them, how is it recommending them?
Right?
Like, is it going to Google and seeing which ones are ranked the top, right?
You're right.
Which are best SEO'd, and is it pulling from that, or is it just pulling from a general list? That may then rightfully, they aren't ranking on the first page of Google, or they're not ranking high because they have very poor reviews, or just they just haven't, they're not doing well. I don't know. Maybe their quality sucks, or maybe they're a gem in the rough. I don't know. But like, what is the logic behind that? And if like you said, if enterprise are noticing they're not getting recognized in these prompts and these recommendations from ChatGPT, is there going to be a pay to play so they can jump the line and start appearing in those now all of a sudden,
Mhm.
right? Which then would link into, their website, and again, that whole SEO strategy. Yeah, I think it will remain to be seen like how this plays out. But at some point, if the quality of what's being recommended through Gen AI is subpar, people are gonna just go back to search because there's an authority thing there. There's ranking for a reason, right? And yes, there's a lot, we can get into that, what's ethical, what's not, what's true or what's not in terms of quality. But that's what we're used to. We're seeing the top rank. You can see who's advertising. You can see all the reviews and all that stuff. You're kind of self-serving yourself through search and like looking at the
Right.
different websites. Um, is if ChatGPT, Perplexity, and the sort are recommending like mediocre businesses, then what happens? Like, how are they going to fix that? Right. So it remains to be seen. They are taking a chunk out of search volume right now, but it remains to be seen what as it relates to commerce and business, how that's going to play out.
Yeah, and there's a divide now too because some of it is like you need on the ground human beings to be able to do something. Plumbers, electricians, whatever, like that's certain like kind of like trades or services or that sort of thing. Then there's like higher level stuff, like business stuff that you and I are up to that yes, most people are capable of spending some time on Google, finding a handful of really good courses, spending maybe 10 or 20 grand to really fully understand at least a few really solid concepts and then implementing those things. And that's going to take you 4 or 5, 6 years maybe to do it all on your own. And so, what's the trade off here? You could hire somebody for that same amount of money who already has the depth but has the experience as well, who can achieve those outcomes for you based on your vision and save you a boatload of time and a boatload of money. And so now the argument is when I go to ChatGPT and I ask it for a complex scenario like a go to market for a new AI tool, it's going to do its best to give me information and it's going to comb all of that information from all over the place and then spit something out because it has to. But is that genuinely going to be useful or helpful or whatever? That's left here to be said. But then on the other side, cool, I have the information, but it's not the information I need, it's the outcome. It's the execution. And I'm only one human being, and I only have the amount of time that one human being has. And unfortunately, when it comes to businesses, building, scaling, growing, you need more than one human being.
Yeah,
That's
you
that's
do.
where we're at, right?
Yeah, that's why experts exist. Like in your scenario, like I got a new product, help me build a go-to-market plan. I think that's okay. You'll get the general idea of how to get to market. And then I would prompt it to ask me is I'm a solopreneur and I only have X amount of hours in a week. What should I prioritize and what should I delegate? And then here's my skill set, here's what I'm good at. This is what I enjoy doing, but this is the urgency of this. Help me prioritize that.
Hmm.
I think it'll give you a general outline. It might give you some ideas, might how to approach it, and then you'll soon quickly find out that it's like, okay, I need to hire somebody to help me, you know, get the landing page up or get the go-to-market messaging or help me develop this back end, right, of the CRM or whatever it is, right? Because then we go back to our original topic, and then it's like learning all of those things. Well, which parts of that whole process are you going to learn and take on? Because you're going to have to do a few of those things, and then which ones do you bring in people for it? But again, two sides of the coin. It's like, well, if you learn and spend time and learn a whole go-to-market process and then ask for examples on how it worked, it's really good to do that because then you kind of learn how the pieces work together and you educate yourself on that. Then you'll know who to work with, right? And that helps in that way too. So
Yeah.
it's not black and white. It's just it's blobby and gray.
Yeah, it's an expanding gray area.
Yes, there's so many cool things about it, but at the same time, it's not um it's your companion, it's symbiotic with what we're doing, and I think that's the way I like to look at it.
Yeah, I imagine a future much like the Tony Stark-esque kind of Iron Man situation here, where you have Jarvis and it's your second brain and helps you with really complex things, but you still are you're still the captain of the ship. Man, I'm a huge proponent, subscriber to the belief that we are the conductors of our own future. So, as we kind of wrap up our episode here, Neil, I wonder, um, what is it that you and I can be doing, or what is it that you are doing? Maybe that might be a better question to craft, create, shape, build, contribute to what the future looks like with a symbiotic relationship between you and AI, your company and AI, the people you serve, and these tools and technologies. What do you see yourself shaping as you continue down this path?
That's a great question. My mind goes to a certain places. So individualistically, I'm using these tools to continuously learn and be better at serving, my clients' businesses. I think when we look at um, a typical business that's scaling, people, processes, and systems. So the processes and systems piece, now with well, not even now. It's been a while since AI has helped, scale and optimize those things. So I think that's where the adoption of AI is going to be prevalent um, in every company. So, they say every company is a tech company. Well, soon every company is going to be an AI company. And whatever that looks like, um, it's going to depend on your own skill set, your own situation, your own competitive advantage, your own processes, your own data set, which is going to be the most important people, and then your own skill set. You're seeing more and more, roles that are transforming into like AI management and stuff like that. You're going to need somebody kind of spearheading that inside your organization. So I think helping that transition, from a skill set standpoint, from a process standpoint, is going to really transform businesses and scale them. Now, the other area, I've been spending, time, I've been volunteering my time with like universities and educational institutions and speaking to the students there, business students in particular. Some are international programs, some are local programs, and it just really reminding them um, not to forget their humanity in all of this, right? And so, how to network, how to make eye contact, how to shake hands, like the networking piece, how to engage with people, um, and then you leverage the tools as you would. And really get good at the tools and really get good at those things. But I think if we turn the dial on the education system, that's a massive dial. I think that has a profound effect on society as we kind of scale through this. So as we become more digital, as we become, as the VR makes come back potentially, we live in a metaverse. The ability to meet in person, the ability to navigate a conversation, make eye contact, shake hands, be in a room full of, people scrutinizing your work and presenting to them. That's going to be a differentiator, I think, in the near term, and hopefully we come out the other end and continue to be more human as we go forward. I don't know if I sound like a boomer saying that, but honestly, we are human and we can't escape from that. Uh, we crave connection. I recently wrote, we pine for originality and not the knockoffs, right?
Mm,
And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of, this emulation in the world we're in. So learning to be original and then expanding that originality through the tools, through AI and everything that you have access to. But I don't know if that answers your question, but I think one big dial is with, the up and coming professionals, the cohort that's in school right now. If we can affect it there, it's going to have profound effect going forward. And then actually ensuring that in the industrial side of things that companies do adopt AI and whatever that looks like for the company, whether it's from a process standpoint or just training the entire org on Gen AI and on their own data. You got to make sure, you're protecting your data. Um, and I think that's going to have a profound effect as we adopt this.
at the before we got on camera, we were talking about an AI tool that I was building, and I was kind of explaining how it's going to help with salespeople to be able to be better at their job, and part of that is learning how to become human again. And the comment that you made was it's really cool that you're using technology to teach people to be more human, and I think that that's such a great way to kind of envelope this entire conversation is that yes, technology is great and it's incredible to have tools that make the time that we spend more effective or efficient or help us achieve our outcomes. But at the end of the day, we do have to remember that on the other side of that technology, on the other side of the comment that you're typing out, is another human being. On the other side of that go to market strategy you're building is the human beings you're trying to serve with that business. And so I think that that's a really insightful way to wrap things up. Neel, you've been so generous with your time and your wisdom, and I'm grateful for that on behalf of everybody that gets a chance to watch this. I'm thank you for doing that, and I'll give you the final remarks here. If there was one thing that you could leave people with after this conversation, what would that be?
Oh God, I think I said a lot already. Um, I kind of like what you said earlier. We're in control of our own domain. We're in control of our own future. What we invest in now, pays off later. I think we do live in an interesting time. But we live in an exciting time. The barriers are very low to learn things, to experiment, to build things. And I highly encourage people to really, really hone in on their curiosity and their creativity and go to town on these tools. And but at the same time, continue to learn, continue to adapt. The world is changing rapidly. The jobs numbers that are going to be affected by AI continue to shift daily. I haven't seen it. I don't know if you have. I haven't seen this massacre of jobs yet. The World Economic Forum just predicted, that it's going to create 80 million new jobs as opposed to destroying jobs. There's going to be about, 90 million that get, displaced or whatever, and 170 that get, developed. So 80 million, or 70 million net new. I'm saying that because it's not doom and gloom, but you will get left behind if you're not tapping into your originality, if you're not adapting, if you're not learning new things, if you're not augmenting what you're already doing, you will get left behind. And I think that's up to you.
Very insightful. Thank you for joining me in this episode. For anybody watching or listening, if they wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, like Neel Singh, Neelsingh. You can go to tropoly.io, tropoly.io, or you can also go to neelsingh.com. Any of those, you can just fire me a note on LinkedIn or send me an email or whatever, and happy to chat.
Wonderful. We'll make sure to link to all that in the show notes. And anybody watching or listening, if you want to get in touch with me, it's theperspectivepodcast.ca. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us for this incredible conversation, and I will see you in the next.